From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
I think it's safe to assume that we are all on the spiritual quest. Say yes if you're on the spiritual quest.
Yes.
Very good. That's most of you. So the spiritual quest to me means that, we're progressing, we're advancing, we're consciously looking to go deeper, understand ourselves more, look at what is there to be released, what is there to be embraced, and to embrace more of the truth and let go of that which is not true about life, about ourselves, and what have you. In order to be in that process of the quest spiritually, one has to be willing at times to be questioning. And that means not just questioning the beliefs, the doctrine, the dogma, but questioning what our thoughts are, our beliefs about ourselves and about life, what it is that are our opinions, what is the energies that are moving through us, and just be asking ourselves various questions that would be appropriate to get honest with ourselves, to see if we're reaching for the highest and are moving forward. One question that I have for you to ask yourself this morning, they're fairly easy questions actually, and should be yes all the way through, and that is, do you want to be free of inner conflict? Do you want to have peace of mind? Do you want to be free of the past? Do you want to be a consistently loving person? Do you want to have a healthy body? Do you want to have internal, ongoing sense of harmony? Do you want to have relationships that work? Do you want to evolve spiritually? Do you want to be happy? Do you want to be prosperous? What is it that could offer all of these things? Well, actually, there is one very powerful, potent spiritual teaching that exists, that you've heard about, that you're familiar with, that's not easy to live, but it requires an ongoing, regular regiment of being awake and aware to it. It's forgiveness. It's forgiveness. Forgiveness offers you all of those things. And where unforgiveness lives, you can scratch out most all of those are going away, okay? So just ask yourself, where you're living in that space and how important it is. Now, we all are growing and learning to forgive. I need to forgive, and I forgive all, I'm asking people to forgive me all the time. I thank the people who forgive me through my life. So it's not something that just is a one-day thing. There are situations and circumstances every day that come up. So forgiveness is a teaching that can deliver all those things that we mentioned. And Jesus taught that the most powerful force in the universe is love, okay? And that the most important commandment is love. And so we're all learning to love. And it is impossible to learn love if you accept that that's what you're here for, that you're here to open your heart more and to be a more loving person. That is impossible if you do not practice forgiveness. And forgiveness essentially means that I decide to love no matter what. It's unconditional. That basically I'm going to be loyal to love because, believe me, life will bring and throw at you all kinds of opportunities to crash and burn on being a loving person, to withhold, to pull back, to withdraw, being that which is your nature to be. And that's why it feels quite horrible, actually, to the degree and the extent that we are unforgiving. Because to be unforgiving is to be unloving, okay? And so it's so important to notice that, and like I say, if you're on the quest, to be questioning in instances, and not just things we say or do which may need forgiveness, but even thoughts we may have, even beliefs that come up that all of a sudden we feel a charge about something that's happened or occurred or even out of our past. We know that we have some healing work to do. So the truth about God is that God is love, and God never stops loving, okay? God's love is eternal, it is ceaseless, it is unending, it is changeless, it's everlasting. That's what it is, and it doesn't come and go. Therefore, you and I in our oneness with God, in our seeking to be one with God, that's what we're called to actually reflect, is the love of God. If we allow God to move through us and through our heart, then that's what we are actually seeking to move toward becoming. So if you're really on the quest spiritually, you really want to evolve spiritually, then you have to be conscientious about all the opportunities life gives you to be loyal to love, no matter what, as God would have you be. So every day we step into the classroom of life and we are challenged to be true to love. And the more that we give that love, in spite of whatever may be thrown at us, the more we really reinforce and undergird a sense that that's who we are. That's who we are. And then that allows us to feel so much more richly full of life. Because the other way is truly blocking life. It's in frequencies and vibrations that don't feel good moving through heart, mind, and soul. The parable of the prodigal son is, very famous, well known. It's the model, it's the great example of the love of God that is always there. And you know what it is. The son took his inheritance and left and went to a far country and separated and kind of made a mess of things a bit, and however you want to describe that. And eventually came to a place where he rose up and decided he wanted to return back into the father and seek forgiveness. And so if you read the account and you're familiar with it, basically the father, when he sees the son, even far off, but returning, the father gets up and ran to meet him and falls down at his son's feet and smothers him with kisses. And there is this overwhelming sense of celebration of love and compassion, withholding nothing having to do with the yesterday or anything that was done. That is such a powerful parable and is such a great example of what the love of God is, and then also, therefore, the kind of love. Why would Jesus share that other than to say, this is God's love and this is what we are called to, that kind of love, to strive toward. Because there will always be people around you that will mess up. And there will always be those who separate on out from their highest. And are you able to still see the highest in them, in spite of where they may be functioning from? And so, in reality, there are really many, a father and son, who are separated and estranged, really. You would be surprised how many exist where there is something that took place in a family, and there is no talking, there is no engaging. Through my years, I've met so many where a person will not return letters, notes, anything, and it can go on for years. There's a story that is said to originate in Spain, and a father and son became estranged. There was some issue that came up, and so the son ran away. And a period of time passed, and eventually the father decided that he wanted to go find his son. And this was in Madrid, Spain. And so the father did all that he could. He searched for months and was unsuccessful. And so in sort of a moment of desperation, he decided to place an ad in the Madrid newspaper. And the ad read, "Dear Paco, meet me in front of this newspaper office at noon on Saturday. All is forgiven. I love you, your father." At noon on that Saturday, 800 Pacos, men named Paco, showed up wanting forgiveness from their father. It's like that in the world. And you think that people don't need to be working on forgiveness? They do. They do. And their life is so enhanced once they release what has stood in the way, what has shut down a quadrant or two of one's heart vibration, really. And so Jesus had lots to say about forgiveness, because when it comes to learning love, as I say, there is no love without forgiveness. Oh yeah, there's some love. There truly is. But love as it's meant to be lived and can be experienced, along with the life, therefore, that is meant to be lived and can be lived, it's not going to happen without forgiveness and learning that principle and applying that law. Some of the references that Jesus made are familiar to you. One is where he said, "Whoever smiteth thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." And what he meant by that, of course, is that we are not to react in kind, okay? We are not to retaliate in the same energy with which that came at us, smack, whatever. It could be in word, in deed, in whatever. And it's not about getting even. It's not about revenge. The ego mind will take us there. You know, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, not do unto others as they just did to you. Right? That's why it's golden. Can you get beyond it? Little of the finish rubs off when we allow the ego mind to take over. Jesus also said, let the dead bury the dead. And what he was talking about is it's so important to let go of the past, to live in the present moment. Done is done. Over is over. Don't die with living in your past. You know, it's a death in a sense that you're going through. You're experiencing a kind of a death to the life that can be lived because you are so hanging on and clinging to something out of the past. I know it's not easy in many of these things, but it's important that one do the healing work, release it, let it go. Let the dead bury the dead. And then, of course, Jesus' statement from the cross, which is so often referred to, which is so understandable. You know, forgive them, for they know not what they do. My goodness gracious, we have to realize that, you know, everyone is still learning and growing, and they don't understand all of the laws and the principles. And maybe they think they understand them intellectually, but they're not living them either. So we're in different stages of development and unfoldment. And so when people come across in ways that are difficult for you to overlook, and you want to retaliate or something, it's great to be able to simply say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They're still learning and growing, as I am. And so it's the recognition of your own personal growth that you're not there yet, that you give others sometimes some slack. Doesn't mean you allow people to just roll over you, you know. You need to just get out of there as opposed to retaliate back. So there is always a way. And I know every situation is unique, and so it's hard to stroke with a broad brush, but forgiveness is really important. And then Jesus was addressing also, well, you know, one thing I just did want to say, you know, people often react from their past hurts and woundedness. And it's important to realize that now a person doesn't realize necessarily what it is that they are doing or have done. But later, with time, a person almost always has some kind of a review, and regret and remorse emerges. And there is some healing that has to be done. So a lot of times we're unconscious in the moment, and then later we become more conscious. And there's some healing to be done. Jesus often addressed, or not often addressed, but Jesus addressed how often one is to forgive. And of course, I think it was Peter, the apostle, that actually approached Jesus and said, Master, how often should we forgive? 7 times? And Jesus' response, of course, was 7 times 70, which is a number that says it's infinite. There is no day that you stop forgiving. You know, it is a part of life. It is ongoing. And that was his response. Now, in Unity, we teach the importance of we're all one. We're in this together. And as much as the mystic would say, we must forgive others because they are us and we are them. Okay? And it's, if you can get to that place as well, it really helps you to forgive another. You'd like people to cut you some slack once in a while when you were unconscious and did something or said something without thinking. And so all of those can be helpful. And so also anger and hatred are basically the things that block the grace of God. And so when we're stuck in anger or bitterness or resentment of some kind, they block the energies by which the grace of God is able to move into a person's life. When you begin to move through that and open to the heart, there are things happening that are synchronistic and miraculous occurrences that are going on a regular basis. And some people say, you know, this stuff never happens to me. And that may be because we need to begin to do some healing and releasing some of the blocks. They teach in India that if you have an estrangement or an issue with your father or mother, if you don't forgive them, that basically it can take away opportunities for prosperity, creates all kinds of blocks in life, things that stand in the way. because energetically it takes you into another vibration and frequency that keeps you from experiencing these things for what it's worth. The Course in Miracles, some of you read and study, familiar with. It used to be in 3 volumes, a text, a workbook, and a manual for teachers. It's all in one now course. It has been for a number of years, but it's really the teachings of Jesus that were said to be channeled by Jesus through a person. So it's in writing. And those writings are wonderful. You can't argue with them. They're very powerful. I've studied them since the 70s. And basically, the whole thing about that is that forgiveness is essential throughout that course. It's all forgiveness. And it's so important and vital. The Holy Spirit grabbing hold of you and having its way in you and surrendering in that way. Let me share a short passage from the Course in Miracles that I like to return to. It states this: "The grace of God rests gently on forgiving eyes, and everything they look on speaks of him to the beholder." I love that just alone, you know. The grace of God rests gently on forgiving eyes, and everything they look on speaks of him to the beholder. He can see no evil, nothing in the world to fear, and no one who is different from himself. The person who forgives basically comes from oneness. And as he loves them, so he looks upon himself with love and gentleness. If you can look on another and give them some slack, you're going to be a lot kinder to yourself as you're learning and growing and making errors. He would no more condemn himself for his mistakes than damn another. He is not an arbiter of vengeance, nor a punisher of sin. The kindness of his sight rests on himself with all the tenderness it offers others. For he would only heal and only bless. I'm only here to heal and to bless, see? And being in accord with what God wills, he has the power to heal and to bless all those he looks on with the grace of God upon his sight. Very powerful, very powerful. The grace of God rests gently on forgiving eyes. The grace of God comes into play, is brought into play for the person who is living forgiveness. And so forgiveness is not so much about changing the world as really seeing the world differently, seeing with forgiving eyes, compassionate eyes. Forgiveness is a process that begins with us in our own heart. It's initiated out of a willingness that I'm not happy. I recognize internal conflict that I have going on. I need to get past. I'm lugging along my past, and I need to get back into the present. And so everyone has forgiveness work to do. Everyone, or you wouldn't be here on this planet really right now. And we should never fool ourselves and think that we don't. In fact, that anytime we have any degree of blame going on, and it's important for us to initiate and communicate that blame, we haven't done our forgiveness work. That's just a big red flag signal. It just is. I behold that in me because I've done my share of blaming. I think I may have shared one time or another that many studies have been done on forgiveness, and that actually from 1998 to 2005, in that period of time alone, there were just under 1,000 studies done on forgiveness. And it was determined that unforgiveness has to do with remembered pain. Remembered pain. It can be anger, it can be resentment, bitterness, hurt, woundedness, hatred, sadness, other emotional pain. It's remembered pain. It's also in those studies that they revealed that forgiveness helps your health, that many a person's health is enhanced who is able to be forgiving or forgive some big issue that they've been carrying around. Just is an opening. Forgiveness also is said to have be able to lower blood pressure, and that they've hooked people up with the instruments and then taken them to a situation that the person remembers and talks about, and the blood pressure just skyrockets as they're talking about it. Lower back pain is said to be helped. And also one of the things that they revealed is that as we age, decade by decade, most people become a bit more forgiving. And that means they become a little bit more reflective. And they begin to be a little bit more honest with themselves in terms of recognizing that they have faults and flaws. just like everyone else. And so as they would like to be forgiven, they need to forgive others. And there's just a shift that begins to happen in a person. The magnitude of things that occur in a person's life that call for forgiveness varies. Some people have gone through horrible things, horrible experiences that are very difficult to forgive and get beyond the pain of. Others have had a lighter road to go and have had a smattering of perhaps lesser things. We're not to measure one and another, but I'm just saying we should never judge another and their difficulty in hanging on to the pain of the past, because some run very deep, their issues. There was Asim Kamisa. He was a fellow that I got to know when I was in Rome with the Synthesis Dialogues and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We had a group with the Association for Global New Thought when I was very active with that leadership team. And anyway, I met Hasim, and he told a story about his son. His son was attending a college in the LA area, and he was delivering pizza in the evening hours to make a few bucks. And his son went to an apartment where there were a group of boys who had been drinking and using drugs. And he knocked on the door, and a young teenager opened the door and held a gun and said he wanted his pizza without paying. And Asim's son tried to leave without leaving the pizza and was shot and killed. And so it took time, but eventually through his spiritual path, he found forgiveness in his heart. And he even developed a relationship as time went on and he healed. He developed a relationship with the grandfather of that boy who killed his son. And even beyond that, he went to the prison and met the boy himself that had killed his son, and found out what a difficult childhood that boy had had. Which didn't excuse the behavior, but it did give him compassion around this boy and what he had gone through to act out in the way that he did. And so Asim even went on to establish a foundation to help young boys, to teach them the power of forgiveness. He's a great man, beautiful man, has written some books. On a national scale, sometimes things happen that allow the world to be given the opportunity to either separate on out or move with forgiveness. And the media will put it in front of us. And there are tragedies that happen, but the tragedy that most recently, I guess, took place is the Charleston, South Carolina. Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, where 9 people who were studying the Bible were shot and killed. And I think you all know about it, because it was out there. You could not know about it, could not know about it. It's heartbreaking. And it touched the families, it touched the church, the people of that church, and it touched our nation, really. And there was something that was remarkable about that, and I hope you all realized what that was, that we got to witness on a national scale, and that was amazing forgiveness. It was there for all eyes, ears to see and hear. We witnessed family members, community leaders. While heartbroken, they expressed forgiveness to that man who had committed that horrible act. The city came together as opposed to tearing itself apart. There was healing and there was love that was shown and demonstrated. At the bond hearing where a judge decides whether to give the accused a chance to be out of jail, bail, awaiting the legal process, the judge allowed members of each victim's family the opportunity to be there and speak. And they spoke about their loved ones, and at the same time, they emphasized their forgiveness that they extended to this 21-year-old who was accused. And this was only days after they had lost their loved ones, that they were able to get to this place. And this person, the accused, wasn't asking for forgiveness, but it was an amazing testimony to forgiveness for the nation to see that it's possible, even in the worst and horrific of happenings, to a family and a community and a church. And so the big question is, we have to ask ourselves, would I be willing to do the same thing if I were in their shoes? Would I have been able to have gotten there in a few days and got to a place in my heart where, yeah, I was wounded by what had happened, but I also had not shut down my heart in that I'm offering forgiveness. Whew. It's no small thing. Forgiveness ends the corrosion of the soul on an individual basis and on a collective basis. And so there is that word repent, and repent means it comes from the word metanoia, and it means an about face. It means to rethink. It means to turn around and to have a change of heart and mind. Repent. Now, large or small, whatever it is that we have to forgive, it's important to realize that we all are dealing with flaws and imperfections. It's not to condone an act. It's not to license another to do whatever one likes. But the key here is to realize that people in the world have their flaws. They're still learning. They're still getting healed, as we are. And the key is that we not become attached to our anger and hatred. You know, we say forgiveness is not amnesia. Forgiveness doesn't require that you forget what took place, but it does require that you withdraw attachment to the anger, the hatred, the bitterness of the event. Yeah, it happened. It was a horrible thing. You can remember that, but you no longer have an attachment in those zone of frequencies which shut the heart down. You're opening your heart. And so I read an article about a lady who told her true story. When she was 18, she was raped and became pregnant. She wrestled with the bitterness. After a while, she got through it, and she had a spiritual path where she got to the place where even as it was happening, she wondered how it was that this person, what it was that would make him capable of doing this while he was in the act. And so she went through a lot of anger and so forth. Eventually, she told herself that what he did was between him and God, and she was moving beyond that. She had a daughter 9 months later, and she said she fell in love with it instantly and never looked back. She never looks at that child and thinks rape. She looks and sees the evidence of God's grace. That's where she's at. Now, Paul Tillich, the theologian, he called the experience of forgiveness the greatest experience anyone can have. Why? Because forgiveness opens you up to a place that is so freeing, so rich in love, that some people have never allowed themselves to go there because of woundedness at an early stage in their life. This is part one. We will be going on to part two. There is so much to say. And next week we'll talk about forgiveness and focus a bit on forgiving oneself. In the meantime, let us all be affirming whenever we see something to forgive. I let go and I let God be God in me, which is love. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.